Jake Morrison was having a bad day. His small research ship was floating dead in space, and alien warships surrounded him on all sides. The enemy vessels looked like giant metal spiders with glowing red eyes. They belonged to the Zeltharian Empire, the most feared force in this part of the galaxy. Jake sat in his pilot chair and watched the aliens board his ship. He could have fought back, but his ship only had basic shields and no weapons. The research vessel was built for science, not war. He was alone, millions of miles from any human colony, and completely helpless. The airlock door burst open with a loud bang. 6 tall, lizard-like aliens rushed inside wearing dark armor and carrying energy weapons. Their skin was green and covered in small scales. Yellow eyes stared at Jake from reptilian faces. Sharp teeth showed when they opened their mouths to speak. "Human, you are now prisoner of the Zeltharian Empire," the leader said in broken English. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "Resist and die. Surrender and live longer." Jake slowly raised his hands. "I surrender. No need for violence." The aliens looked surprised. Most humans fought back when captured. They expected screaming, running, or at least fear. Instead, this human sat calmly in his chair with a slight smile on his face. "You are not afraid?" asked the leader, tilting his scaled head. "Should I be?" Jake replied. "Getting angry won't help my situation." The aliens bound Jake's hands with energy cuffs and dragged him to their ship. The Zeltharian battlecruiser was massive, easily 100 times larger than Jake's small vessel. Dark corridors stretched in all directions, filled with the sound of marching feet and alien voices. They brought Jake to the command center, where the ship's captain waited. Commander Vex 9 was older than the other aliens, with deeper scars on his face and more decorations on his armor. He looked at Jake like a scientist studying a bug. "Another human pest," Vex 9 said to his officers. "They spread across the galaxy like a disease. This one was collecting data near our border." Jake said nothing. He had learned long ago that staying quiet was often the smartest choice when dealing with hostile aliens. "What were you doing in restricted space?" Vex 9 demanded. "Research," Jake answered simply. "Studying star patterns and solar winds. Nothing military." "All humans are military," Vex 9 snarled. "You expand everywhere, make friends with everyone, cause trouble for honest empires." "You are dangerous." Jake almost laughed. Dangerous? He was a scientist, not a soldier. He spent his time looking at stars and taking notes, not fighting wars. But he kept his thoughts to himself. "Take him to Detention Block 7, Vex 9 ordered. "Let him meet our special guests." The guards pushed Jake through more corridors until they reached a heavily secured area. Massive doors lined the walls, each one marked with warning signs in multiple languages. The air here felt different, charged with energy and danger. "Block 7 houses our most dangerous prisoners," one guard explained with obvious pleasure. "Draconian warriors from the Andromeda sector. They are 12 feet tall, breathe fire, and have scales harder than our ship armor. Very angry beings." Jake nodded politely. "Sounds interesting." The guard stared at him. "Interesting? Human, they will kill you in minutes." "The last 3 prisoners we put in there lasted less than an hour each." "Why do you keep them?" Jake asked. "Entertainment," the guard said with a cruel smile. "Our people enjoy watching the games. These dragons make excellent gladiators." They stopped at a door, marked with skull symbols and warnings in bright red letters. The guard entered a code, and the massive door slowly opened. Beyond lay a large cell, maybe 50 feet across, with thick walls and a high ceiling. 6 enormous shapes moved in the shadows. As Jake's eyes adjusted to the dim light, he saw them clearly for the first time. The Draconian warriors were everything the guard had described and more. They stood on two legs like humans, but their bodies were covered in dark scales that gleamed like metal. Their heads were long and narrow, with glowing golden eyes and mouths full of sharp teeth. Wings folded against their backs, and their hands ended in razor-sharp claws. "Fresh meat," rumbled the largest dragon. His voice was deep and threatening, like distant thunder. Battle scars covered his body, and one eye was clouded white from an old injury. "I am Corvath. I will make your death quick if you amuse me." The other dragons moved closer, forming a circle around Jake. Their golden eyes studied him with predatory interest. Heat radiated from their bodies, and the smell of sulfur filled the air. The guard pushed Jake into the cell and quickly sealed the door. "Goodbye, human," he called through the metal barrier. "Try to die with honor." Jake found himself alone with 6 of the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. Any normal person would have been terrified. These creatures could melt steel with their breath and tear apart starship hulls with their claws. They had spent years in captivity, nursing their hatred and anger. But Jake looked up at Corvath and smiled. "Nice to meet you. I'm Jake Morrison. I hope we can be friends." The dragons stared at him in complete silence. In all their years of captivity, no prisoner had ever greeted them with friendship. Most begged for mercy or tried to hide in the corners. This human stood in the center of their circle, calm and relaxed, as if he was meeting neighbors at a barbecue. "Friends?" Corvath repeated the word like he had never heard it before. "What is this word?" "It means people who care about each other," Jake explained. "People who help each other and share good times together." The dragons looked at each other uncertainly. They understood words like enemy, prey, and death. But friendship was something completely foreign to their experience. "Humans are strange," muttered another dragon. "This one might be broken." Jake sat down cross-legged on the cell floor, making himself comfortable. "I'm not broken. Just different, I guess. So, what do you guys do for fun around here?" And so began the most unusual conversation in the history of the Zeltharian Empire. 3 days passed, and the Zeltharian guards could not believe what they were seeing. Every morning, they expected to find a pile of ash where the human had been. Every evening, they found Jake Morrison sitting peacefully with 6 deadly dragons. Talking like old friends, Security Chief Tal 7 stood in the monitoring room, watching the impossible scene on his screens. The dragons, who had killed every previous cellmate within hours, were actually listening to the human speak. Corvath, the most violent prisoner they had ever captured, sat quietly while Jake told stories about something called pizza, run. Recordings again. Tal 7 ordered his technician that the footage showed the first night. Jake had somehow survived the initial meeting, which was already strange. But then something even stranger happened. When the food delivery arrived, Jake took his small portion and divided it equally among the 6 dragons. "He gave them his food," the technician said, shaking his head. "No prisoner has ever shared food with those monsters." "Keep watching," Tal 7 replied. The second day showed more impossible behavior. One of the younger dragons, called Zex, had accidentally burned Jake's hand while demonstrating his fire breath. Instead of screaming or running away, Jake examined the burn with interest and thanked Zex for showing him the ability. But the most shocking moment came when Corvath, the scarred leader of the dragons, gently tended to Jake's burn. The massive warrior used his claws with surgical precision to clean the wound, then breathed a controlled flame to seal it. Dragons did not help other species. Dragons killed other species. Yet here was clear evidence of care and medical treatment. "Something is very wrong," Tal 7 muttered. "Humans are not supposed to survive contact with Draconians." He called for Dr. Nex 4, the ship's chief scientist. She arrived quickly, her scaled face showing curiosity about the unusual summons. "Doctor, I need you to explain this," Tal 7 said, pointing at the screens. How is that human still alive? Dr. Nexfor watched the footage carefully. Her scientific mind tried to find logical explanations for what she was seeing. Perhaps the dragons are saving him for later entertainment? For 3 days, Draconians have no patience. They kill immediately when angry, and they are always angry. Then maybe the human has some kind of protection, hidden technology, or weapons? Tal 7 shook his head. We scanned him completely. No technology, no weapons, no hidden devices. He is exactly what he appears to be, an ordinary human scientist. On the screens, they watched Jake teach the dragons a human game called Rock, Paper, Scissors. The massive warriors played with surprising gentleness, their deadly claws barely touching Jake's soft human hands. When Jake won a round, the dragons actually seemed pleased for him. This defies everything we know about both species, Dr. Nexfor said. Humans are weak. Draconians are violent. There should be no common ground between them. Yet there they are, Tal 7 replied, playing games together. The third day brought even more confusing developments. The dragons began teaching Jake their fighting techniques, moving slowly so his human reflexes could follow. In return, Jake showed them human exercises like push-ups and stretching. The deadly warriors followed his instructions with the enthusiasm of students learning from a respected teacher. During mealtimes, the dragons started saving the best parts of their food for Jake. When he protested that he could not eat raw meat, they used their fire breath to cook it perfectly. The cell, which had been a place of violence and death, became something like a classroom or training ground. I want a full biological scan, Tal 7 ordered. Deep analysis of the human's DNA, brain patterns, everything. There has to be an explanation. The medical teams worked for hours, using every scanner and sensor the ship possessed. They analyzed Jake's blood, tissue samples, and neural activity. The results were completely normal for a human male of his age and species. Heart rate stable, brain patterns typical, cellular structure standard, Dr. Nexfor reported. By every measure we have, he is an ordinary human being. Then explain the dragon's behavior, Tal 7 demanded. I cannot. It should be impossible. In the cell, Jake was sharing another story with his new friends. This time he spoke about Earth's oceans and the creatures that lived in them. The dragons listened with fascination as he described whales, dolphins, and colorful fish. Your world sounds beautiful, Horvath said. His voice had lost its threatening tone, becoming almost wistful. Our homeworld was mostly mountains and caves. Very different from your blue seas. Was? Jake asked gently. The Zaltharians destroyed it. Another dragon named Vorth answered bitterly. Bombed it from orbit until nothing lived. We were the only survivors, captured during the final battle. Jake felt genuine sadness for his companions. I'm sorry. That must have been terrible. The dragons exchanged glances. No one had ever expressed sympathy for their loss before. The Zaltharians treated them as weapons or entertainment, not as beings capable of grief and memory. You are strange, Jake Morrison, Horvath said. When you speak of sorrow, we feel your pain as if it were our own. When you speak of joy, warmth fills our hearts. How is this possible? Jake considered the question. Maybe it's because I'm really listening to you. Not just hearing words, but understanding what those words mean to you personally. Others have heard our words, Zex said. Guards, scientists, prisoners, but none have understood our meaning. Understanding takes practice, Jake replied, and it requires wanting to understand. I want to know who you really are, not just what you look like or how dangerous you might be. The monitoring room fell silent as the security team listened to this conversation. The implications were staggering. If humans possessed some natural ability to connect with other species on a deep emotional level, it would explain many things. about their rapid expansion across the galaxy. "Doctor," Tal 7 said slowly, "what if the human's power is not physical or technological? What if it is something else entirely?" Dr. Nex 4 nodded thoughtfully. "Psychological manipulation, perhaps? Some form of mental control?" "No," Tal 7 replied, studying Jake's face on the screen. "Look at him. He is not trying to control them. He is simply being himself, and somehow that is enough to change everything." As night fell on the third day, the dragons arranged themselves in a protective circle around Jake as he slept. These beings who had spent years hating everything and everyone now stood guard over a human they had known for less than a week. "This changes everything," Tal 7 whispered. "If one human can do this to our most dangerous prisoners, what could a whole ship of humans accomplish?" The question would haunt him through the long night ahead as he began to understand that humanity might be far more dangerous than anyone had ever imagined. Not because of their weapons or technology, but because of something much more subtle and powerful, their ability to make friends out of enemies. Dr. Nex 4 could not sleep. For 3 nights, she had stared at the test results, trying to understand what made Jake Morrison different from every other human she had studied. On the surface, everything appeared normal. But something deep in his genetic code was calling to her scientific curiosity. "Computer, run a deep genetic analysis on human prisoner Morrison," she ordered. "Level 9 scan, including dormant DNA sequences." The ship's medical computer hummed to life, processing the complex request. Level 9 scans took hours and used enormous amounts of power, but they could reveal genetic secrets hidden in inactive parts of DNA. While the computer worked, Dr. Nex 4 reviewed what she knew about human genetics. Humans were supposed to be a single species race, unable to interbreed with other forms of life. Their DNA was locked into one pattern, unchanging and incompatible with alien biology. But Jake Morrison was making her question everything she thought she knew about humans. In the detention cell, Jake was teaching the dragons about human music. He hummed simple melodies and explained how sounds could express emotions. The dragons tried to copy the tunes, their deep voices creating harmonies that shook the walls. "Music brings people together," Jake explained. "Even when we speak different languages, we can share feelings through songs." Corvath nodded slowly. "On our world, we had battle songs. But these melodies you teach us speak of peace and joy." "We had forgotten such things existed." "They always exist," Jake replied. "Sometimes they just get buried under pain and anger. But they never really disappear." The computer finished its analysis just as the ship's night cycle began. Dr. Nex 4 looked at the results and felt her blood turn cold. What she was seeing could not be real, but the data was clear and undeniable. "Impossible," she whispered, then ran the test again. The results came back identical. Jake Morrison's DNA contained genetic markers from dozens of different species. Not just human DNA, but traces of draconian genetics, Saltharian sequences, and patterns from at least 40 other alien races. It was as if his genetic code was designed to interface with any form of life it encountered. "Computer, analysis of integration probability," she commanded. "Integration probability with draconian DNA, 97%. Integration probability with Zaltharian DNA, 94%. Integration probability with known galactic species, average 89%. Dr. Nex 4 sat down heavily in her chair. This was beyond anything science had ever discovered. Jake Morrison was not just human. He was something new, something that could bridge the gaps between species that had been isolated for millions of years. She rushed to find Commander Vex 9, her mind racing with the implications. If humans possessed this ability naturally, it would explain their rapid expansion across the galaxy. They were not just explorers or warriors. They were universal connectors, beings who could understand and relate to any form of life. Commander. She burst into the command center. The human prisoner, there is something you must know. VEX-9 looked up from his tactical displays, annoyed at the interruption. What is it, Doctor? Is the human finally dead? No, sir. He is very much alive. And I know why. His genetic code contains compatibility markers for multiple species. He can literally connect with other life forms on a biological level. The commander stared at her. You are saying he is not fully human? He is human, but enhanced, evolved. His DNA has sequences that allow him to understand and communicate with any species he encounters. The Draconians are not responding to psychological manipulation. They are responding to genuine biological compatibility. In the cell, Jake was listening to stories about the dragon's homeworld. They spoke of crystal caves that sang in the wind, of great libraries carved into mountain faces, of poetry written in fire across the sky. Their culture had been rich and complex before the Zeltharians destroyed it. We were scholars as much as warriors, Korvath explained. Our people valued knowledge and art alongside strength and courage. That sounds wonderful, Jake said sincerely. I wish I could have seen your world. Perhaps you would have been welcome there, Zek said thoughtfully. You have the heart of a scholar and the courage of a warrior, even though you carry no weapons. The best weapon is understanding, Jake replied. Violence should always be the last choice, not the first. The dragons considered this. In their culture, strength and fighting ability determined worth. But Jake showed them a different kind of strength, the power to change hearts and minds through compassion and wisdom. Commander. VEX-9 studied the genetic analysis with growing alarm. If humans possessed this ability naturally, they represented a threat, unlike anything the Empire had ever faced. Not a military threat, but something far more dangerous, the threat of unity. Doctor, if humans can connect with other species so easily, why do we not see this ability more often? Dr. Nex-4 had been wondering the same thing. Perhaps most humans do not know they have this ability. Or perhaps it only activates under certain conditions, stress, danger, or isolation. Or perhaps, Vex-9 said slowly, this human is special, even among his own kind. The possibility sent chills through both of them. If Jake Morrison represented the next step in human evolution, what did that mean for the rest of the galaxy? How many other humans like him existed? Sir, I recommend we contact High Command immediately, Dr. Nex-4 said. This discovery could change everything. But before Vex-9 could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Red lights flashed, and the voice of the communications officer echoed through the corridors. Commander to the bridge immediately. Human fleet approaching. At high speed, Vex-9 rushed to the command center, where his officer showed him the sensor readings. A dozen human ships had dropped out of hyperspace just outside weapons range. They were not attacking, but their presence was clearly a threat. How did they find us? Vex-9 demanded. Unknown, sir. They are requesting permission to communicate. Put them through. The main screen flickered to life, showing a human woman in a blue uniform. She appeared calm and professional, but her eyes held the same unsettling quality that Vex-9 had noticed in Jake Morrison. I am Admiral Lisa Parker of the Human Alliance, she said. We believe you have one of our people aboard your vessel. We would like him returned unharmed. The human is our prisoner, taken legally in restricted space, Vex-9 replied. The human you captured is under diplomatic protection, Admiral Parker said smoothly. His return is not negotiable. There was something in her tone that made Vex-9 uncomfortable. This was not a plea or a demand. It was a simple statement of fact delivered with absolute confidence. And if we refuse? He asked. Admiral Parker smiled, and Vex-9 felt a chill run down his spine. Then you will discover exactly why humans have been so successful at making friends across the galaxy. We are very good at persuading people to see things our way. The transmission ended, leaving the Zeltharian command crew in nervous silence. Outside, the human ships waited patiently, their weapons powered down, but their message cleared out in the detention cell. Jake Morrison continued his conversations with the dragons, completely unaware that his rescue was at hand. But even if he had known, he would not have been worried. He trusted his friends to keep him safe, and he was beginning to suspect that his new dragon companions would have something to say about anyone who tried to harm him. The revelation of his true nature was about to change everything, but Jake remained focused on what mattered most, the connections he was building with 6 lonely warriors who had forgotten what friendship meant. Commander Vex 9 stared at the human fleet through the main viewer, his mind racing with possibilities. 12 ships against his single battle cruiser. The odds were not good. But he had something the humans wanted, and that gave him power. Prepare. The arena, he ordered his officers. We will show these humans what happens when they threaten the Zeltharian Empire. The arena was a large open space in the ship's center, designed for gladiatorial games. The crew gathered around the viewing galleries, eager to watch the entertainment. VEX-9 activated the communication system to broadcast across the human fleet. "Admiral Parker," he said with a cruel smile, "you want your human back? Come and take him. We are releasing our prisoners onto the surface of the nearby colony world. If your friend survives what we unleash, you may have him." The human colony below was small and peaceful, with maybe 10,000 people living in simple farming communities. They had no weapons, no defenses, and no warning of what was coming. "You monster," Admiral Parker's voice crackled through the speakers. "Those are innocent civilians." "They are humans," Vex 9 replied. "All humans are guilty of the crime of expansion. Watch as our dragons reduce your colony to ash." He cut the transmission and turned to his crew. "Open the detention cells. Release all prisoners onto the planet's surface. Let the humans see what their interference costs." The guards moved quickly through the ship, opening cell doors and activating transport beams. Most prisoners were small-time criminals or political dissidents. They would cause little trouble on the surface. But the dragons were different. They were weapons of mass destruction, and Vex 9 expected them to paint the colony in fire and blood. The transport beam activated around Jake and the 6 dragons. Light filled the cell, and suddenly they were standing on green grass under a blue sky. The human colony spread out before them, peaceful and unaware of the danger. Jake looked around at the frightened faces of the colonists, then at his dragon companions. This was the moment of truth. Would they choose violence or something else? "My friends," he said quietly to the dragons, "you have a choice to make. You can follow your anger and hurt these innocent people, or you can choose a different path." Corvath stood tall, his golden eyes reflecting the alien sun. "For years, we have dreamed of revenge against those who destroyed our world. These humans are not our enemies, but they are the same species as those who imprison us." "Yes," Jake said, "they are the same species as me. If you kill them, you kill part of what I am." The dragons looked at each other, communicating in ways that went beyond words. They had spent days learning about human compassion, about friendship and mercy. Jake had shown them a different way to live, but could they follow it when the moment came? "We choose," Corvath said finally. "We choose the path you have shown us." Instead of attacking the colonists, the dragons formed a protective circle around them. When Zeltharian fighters screamed down from the sky, firing energy bolts at the helpless humans, the dragons met them with controlled bursts of flame that disabled the ships without killing the pilots. In the ship's command center, Vex 9 watched in horror as his plan collapsed. The dragons, his most feared weapons, were protecting the humans instead of destroying them. It was impossible, unthinkable. But it was happening. How? He whispered. How did one human change them so completely? The answer came when Jake's voice filled the ship's communication system. Somehow, he had accessed the colony's emergency broadcast network. "People of the Zelfarian ship," Jake said calmly. "Your prisoners are free, but they choose to stand. With us, you have two options. You can continue this conflict and face the consequences, or you can surrender and learn what humans really have to offer." "Never," Vex 9 snarled. "All weapons target the colony. Destroy everything." But when he pressed the firing controls, nothing happened. The ship's weapons remained silent, their targeting systems offline. On the planet's surface, the dragons had not been idle. While protecting the colonists, they had also been sending precise beams of energy into space, disabling the battle cruiser's most dangerous systems. "Sir," the weapons officer reported in panic, "main guns are offline. Shield generators are failing. Engineering reports multiple systems damaged." A dragon's fire had been surgical in its precision. They had crippled the ship's offensive capabilities without causing casualties among the crew. It was a level of control that should have been impossible for creatures driven by rage and hatred. "Impossible," Vex 9 repeated. "They are mindless. Beasts. They cannot think strategically." "Maybe you never gave them a chance to show their intelligence," Jake's voice replied. "Maybe you saw what you expected to see instead of what was really there." The human fleet moved closer, their ships surrounding the disabled Zeltharian vessel, but they did not attack. Instead, they simply waited, giving Vex 9 time to make his choice. On the colony's surface, more impossible things were happening. The dragons were helping human families evacuate to safety, carrying children on their backs and shielding the elderly with their wings. Korvath used his fire breath to clear debris from a collapsed building, while Zex helped rescue workers dig through rubble. "They are not monsters," one colonist said in amazement. "They are heroes." Jake smiled as he watched his friends work. This was what he had hoped for. Not just friendship, but transformation. The dragons had found something worth fighting for besides revenge. "All crew to evacuation stations," Jake announced over the ship's communication system. "Your commanders have 30 minutes to surrender, or we will be forced to take stronger action." Vex 9 looked around his command center at the faces of his officers. They were frightened, confused, and beginning to doubt everything they had been taught about humans and their alien allies. "Sir," his second-in-command said quietly, "perhaps we should consider their offer." "Never," Vex 9 repeated, but his voice lacked conviction. "We are the Zelfarian Empire. We do not surrender to inferior species." "Sir," Dr. Nexfor approached cautiously, "based on my analysis, humans may not be inferior. They may be something we have never encountered before, a species that makes everything around them better." The words hung in the air like a challenge to everything the Empire believed. If humans could transform deadly enemies into protectors, what else might they be capable of? 10 minutes remaining," Jake announced. "After that, my friends will come aboard your ship. I trust you will treat them with respect." The thought of 6 dragons roaming freely through his ship made Vex 9's blood turn cold. If they could disable his weapons from the planet's surface, what could they do if they were actually aboard? "Sir," the communications officer said, "Admiral Parker is requesting permission to speak with you." VEX9 nodded reluctantly. The human woman appeared on the screen, her expression serious but not angry. "Commander," she said, "this does not have to end in violence. We are prepared to discuss terms." "Terms?" Vex 9 asked. "Safe passage for your crew in exchange for your surrender. No one needs to die today." It was more mercy than the Empire had ever shown to defeated enemies. Vex 9 realized that he was facing something completely outside his experience, an enemy that preferred peace to victory. "Why?" he asked. "Why offer mercy to those who would destroy you?" Admiral Parker smiled, and Vex 9 saw the same strange quality in her eyes that he had noticed in Jake Morrison. "Because that is what humans do. We make friends, not corpses." The choice was clear: surrender with honor or face the consequences of continued resistance. As Vex 9 looked at his crew, he realized that the battle was already lost. Jake Morrison had not just tamed 6 dragons. He had shown the entire galaxy a different way to resolve conflicts. "I surrender," Vex 9 said quietly, "but I want to meet this human who has changed everything." "That can be arranged," Admiral Parker replied. "Welcome to the human way of doing things." Admiral Lisa Parker stood in the Zeltharian ship's command center, surrounded by nervous alien officers. The surrender had been peaceful, with no casualties on either side. But the real surprise was waiting in the detention area, where Jake Morrison sat calmly with 6 dragon warriors who had become his loyal friends. "Jake," Admiral Parker said as she entered the cell, "I see you have been busy." Jake stood up and smiled. "Lisa, good to see you. I hope the trip was not too difficult." "Agent Morrison," she replied formally, though her eyes showed relief. "Please, report on your mission status." The Zeltharian officers gasped. Agent Morrison? The human had been some kind of spy or soldier all along? Commander Vex 9 stepped forward, his face showing confusion and anger. "You lied to us," he said. "You pretended to be a simple scientist." "I never lied," Jake replied calmly. "I am a scientist. I study alien species and how they interact with humans, but I am also an agent of the Human Alliance, specifically the Xenological Integration Division." Dr. Nexfor moved closer, her scientific mind working to understand the implications. "Xenological Integration Division? What is that?" Admiral Parker answered. "It is humanity's most important organization. We create agents who can connect with any alien species they encounter. Jake is one of our best." "How is it possible?" Vex 9 demanded. "No species can naturally interface with so many different forms of life." Jake sat back down, gesturing for everyone to gather around. Even the dragons moved closer, interested in hearing the full story. "It started about 50 years ago, when humans first began expanding into space. We met dozens of different species, and we realized something important." He paused, looking around at all the faces watching him. "Fighting wars is expensive and dangerous. Making friends is much more effective. So we began a program to enhance human diplomatic abilities." "Enhancement?" Dr. Nexfor asked. "Genetic modification," Admiral Parker explained. "We studied the DNA of every species we encountered and found ways to incorporate compatibility markers into human genetics. It took decades of research, but we finally created humans who could understand and connect with any form of life." Korvath, the dragon leader, tilted his massive head. "So you were made to be our friend?" "I was made to be capable of friendship with anyone," Jake corrected. "But the choice to actually be friends was always yours. I could not force you to like me. I could only make it possible for us to understand each other." The implications were staggering. If humans had been secretly creating these enhanced agents for decades, how many other species had been influenced without knowing it? "How many agents like you exist?" Vex 9 asked. "Thousands," Jake replied. "We are spread across the galaxy, working to build bridges between species that have been enemies for centuries. Most of the time, people never know what we are. We simply appear to be humans who are good at making friends." Dr. Nexfor understood now why the Zeltharian Empire had been having so much trouble with their prisoners lately. Your agents have been working with our captives, turning them against us. We have been showing them that there are alternatives to violence and hatred, Admiral Parker said. Many species join us willingly once they understand what we offer. And what do you offer? Vex 9 asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Freedom, Jake said simply. The freedom to choose your own path instead of following orders based on fear. The freedom to build something better than endless conquest and domination. He stood up and walked to the center of the group. Look around you. A week ago, these dragons hated everything and everyone. They were consumed by rage and thoughts of revenge. But when given the choice, they chose compassion over violence. They chose to protect innocent people instead of destroying them. Zex, one of the younger dragons, spoke up. Jake showed us that strength does not always mean fighting. Sometimes the strongest choice is mercy. This is why the Empire has been losing ground across the galaxy, Admiral Parker continued. Not because humans have better weapons or larger fleets, but because we offer something your Empire cannot. Hope for a better future. Commander Vex 9 looked around at his officers. He could see doubt in their eyes, questions they had never dared ask before. The Empire ruled through fear and force, but what if there was a different way? What happens to us now? He asked. That depends on you, Jake replied. You can return to the Empire and report what you have learned. You can continue to serve a system built on oppression and violence, or you can choose something different. You want us to betray our own people? I want you to think about what is best for all people, Jake said. The Empire has conquered 17 star systems, but what has it built? What has it created that makes the galaxy a better place? Dr. Nex 4 had been quiet, but now she spoke. We have brought order to chaotic systems. We have unified different species under one government. Unified through conquest, Admiral Parker pointed out. That is not unity. That is domination. True unity comes when different species choose to work together because they share common goals. Like these dragons chose to work with the human. Colonists, Jake added. No one forced them to protect those people. They made that choice because they understood it was right. Corvath nodded his massive head. For the first time in years, we felt pride in our actions instead of shame. We remembered what it meant to be protectors instead of destroyers. The conversation continued for hours. Jake and Admiral Parker explained how the human alliance worked, not as conquerors, but as facilitators. They helped different species find common ground, resolve conflicts peacefully, and build cooperative relationships. We have agents working with former enemies of yours right now, Admiral Parker revealed. The Andromedan Council, the Spiral Confederacy, the Ring Worlds Alliance. All former victims of the Empire who are now working together to build something better. How is this possible? Vex 9 asked. These species have hated each other for centuries. Hatred is often based on misunderstanding, Jake explained. When people really get to know each other, they usually find they have more in common than they thought. My job is to help them see past their differences to find those common bonds. As the discussion went on, more Selfarian crew members joined the conversation. They asked questions about human society, about how different species live together peacefully, about what their own lives might be like in a galaxy without constant warfare. I want to see this alliance of yours, Dr. Nex 4 said finally. I want to understand how it really works. You are welcome to visit our worlds, Admiral Parker replied. Many former enemies have become some of our closest allies once they saw what we were building. Commander Vex 9 made his decision. I will return to the Empire with this information, but I will also send volunteers to learn more about your alliance. Perhaps there is a middle path between conquest and surrender. Jake smiled. This was exactly the kind of opening he had hoped for. Change takes time. But every journey begins with a single step. Over the following months, the galaxy began to shift in ways that few had thought possible. The story of Jake Morrison and the dragons spread across thousands of worlds. It became a symbol of what was possible when enemies chose understanding over hatred. The Zeltharian Empire did not collapse overnight, but cracks appeared in its foundation. When people learned that there were alternatives to endless warfare, many began to question the system they had served without thinking. Jake returned to Earth as a hero, but he never forgot the lesson learned in that dragon-filled cell. The most powerful force in the universe was not energy weapons or massive fleets. It was the simple willingness to see others as potential friends rather than automatic enemies. The dragons stayed with the human alliance, becoming ambassadors to other warrior species. Korvath often told the story of how one human had changed their lives simply by treating them with respect and kindness. He did not conquer us, Korvath would say. He freed us. He showed us who we could choose to be instead of who we had been forced to become. And across the galaxy, other humans like Jake Morrison continued their quiet work of building bridges between species, creating friendships that crossed the barriers of biology and culture. They proved that the greatest human talent was not their technology or their courage, but their ability to help others become the best versions of themselves. The universe was vast and filled with countless different forms of life. But thanks to humans like Jake Morrison, it was also becoming a place where those differences were celebrated rather than feared, where diversity was seen as strength rather than weakness. In the end, the dragons had been right about one thing. Jake Morrison was something else entirely. He was what humans became when they decided that making friends was more important than making war. And that, perhaps, was the most powerful force in the universe.